The thunder of hooves matched the pounding in Willa Bailey's heart as she raced her mare across the open plain toward her father's ranch, the telegram clutched in her trembling hand like a death warrant. Pa was gone, the message said, taken by fever 3 days before. And even worse, her brother Wade was already at the Broken Arrow claiming everything that rightfully belonged to both of them. April 1875 had brought nothing but heartache to the 19-year-old, who'd only just returned from 2 years at Miss Porter's school for young ladies in Denver. The finishing school had been her father's idea, his gift to her before he passed, though neither of them had expected that day to come so soon. Willa slowed her horse as she crested the hill overlooking the sprawling Broken Arrow ranch. The land stretched for miles in every direction, cattle dotting the landscape like tiny specks against the Wyoming Territory's vast emptiness. This was her legacy, half of it, anyway. The ranch her father had built from nothing over 20 years of backbreaking work. Her mare, Penny, huffed beneath her as they made their way down the hill toward the ranch house. Willa's stomach knotted tighter with every step closer. She hadn't seen Wade in nearly 3 years, not since he'd stormed off after their father refused to loan him money for some gambling debts. Their relationship had always been strained, but that final argument had severed what little connection remained between them. As she approached the ranch house, Willa noticed a stranger sitting on the porch steps, whittling a piece of wood. Tall and lean, with a shock of sandy hair visible beneath his worn Stetson, he looked up at her approach. His tanned face was weathered but youthful, and his eyes, piercing blue even from this distance, assessed her with quiet interest. "Madam," he said, standing and nodding respectfully as she dismounted, "you must be Miss Bailey." "I am," Willa replied cautiously, tying Penny to the hitching post. "And who might you be?" "Cole Northrop," he answered, pocketing his knife and dusting off his hands on his worn denim pants. "Your brother hired me on as foreman about a week ago." Willa's brow furrowed. "A week ago." My father had only just the front door swung open with a bang, and Wade Bailey stepped onto the porch, a glass of whiskey in hand despite the early hour. At 25, he looked older than Willa remembered, harder around the edges, with a gleam in his eye that sent a chill down her spine. Well, Wade drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "Look who finally decided to show up. Little sister's come home to pay her respects." "I came as soon as I got the telegram," Willa said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Why didn't you send word sooner? I should have been here before he was buried." Wade shrugged and took a swig from his glass. "Wasn't sure where to find you. Besides, Pa's in the ground now." Nothing to be done about it. Willa felt tears stinging her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not in front of Wade, not in front of this stranger. "I'd like to see his grave," she said quietly. "Suit yourself," Wade replied, gesturing vaguely toward the small family plot on the hillside behind the house. "Northrop, take care of my sister's horse." Cole nodded but said nothing, his expression unreadable as he took Penny's reins. Willa noticed how gently he handled the mare, speaking to her in low tones as he led her toward the stable. The next hour passed in a blur of grief as Willa knelt beside her father's fresh grave, the reality of his death finally sinking in. By the time she returned to the house, she'd composed herself enough to face what she knew would be a difficult conversation with Wade. She found him in their father's study, feet propped up on the massive oak desk, rifling through papers. "We need to talk about the ranch," Willa said, standing in the doorway. Wade barely glanced up. "Not much to talk about. Pa left everything to me." The words hit Willa like a physical blow. "That's not possible. He always said the ranch would go to both of us." Wade's smile was cold as he tossed a document toward her. "See for yourself. Last will and testament of Thomas Bailey. Everything goes to his only son, Wade Thomas Bailey." Willa snatched up the paper, scanning it with growing dismay. It looked legitimate, with their father's signature at the bottom and the seal of a notary public. But something felt wrong. This couldn't be what her father had wanted. "This can't be right," she whispered. "When was this written?" 3 months ago, Wade said smoothly. "Right before you were supposed to come home from that fancy school. Guess he had a change of heart about you." Willa's fingers tightened on the paper. "I want to see the lawyer who prepared this." "Suit yourself. Old man Jenkins in town handled it, but it won't change anything." Wade stood, towering over her. You've got 2 days to collect your things and find somewhere else to go. I'm selling off half the herd next week and have plans for this place that don't include you. Willa stood her ground. This is my home too, Wade. I'm not going anywhere until I'm satisfied this is what Pa truly wanted. Something dangerous flashed in Wade's eyes. Don't push me, little sister. You're only still standing here because we share the same blood, but my patience has limits. The threat hung in the air between them as Wade brushed past her and out of the study. Willa remained frozen, the will clutched in her hand, her mind racing. Something was terribly wrong, and she had exactly 2 days to figure out what. The next morning, Willa rose before dawn and saddled Penny herself, determined to reach town and speak with Jenkins before Wade realized she was gone. The town of Sweetwater was a good hour's ride from the ranch, and she wanted to be there when the lawyer's office opened. As she led Penny quietly from the stable, a voice spoke from the shadows. Headed somewhere, Miss Bailey. Willa nearly jumped out of her skin. Cole Northrop emerged from the darkness, already dressed for the day's work, his expression serious in the pre-dawn light. Mr. Northrop, she said, gathering her composure, you startled me. Apologies, he replied, though his eyes remained watchful. It's mighty early for a social call. I have business in town, Willa said, lifting her chin. And I don't believe I need permission from my brother's hired hand to leave my own property. A hint of a smile touched Cole's lips. No, madam, you surely don't, but these trails can be dangerous for a woman riding alone. Might be prudent to have company. Willa hesitated, studying him. Why would you help me? You work for Wade. I work for the Broken Arrow, he corrected quietly. And right now, I'm not certain who that means I'm working for. There was something in his tone that made Willa pause. What do you mean by that? Cole glanced toward the still dark house before stepping closer. Your brother's been making some strange decisions since I got here. Selling off prime breeding stock at low prices to men I wouldn't trust to water my horse, firing hands who have been loyal to this ranch for years. He paused. And that while he's waving around, something doesn't sit right about it. Willa's heart quickened. You think it's a forgery? I think it's worth investigating, Cole said carefully, and I think you might need someone watching your back while you do. Willa studied him for a long moment. Everything about this man was a contradiction. He had the weathered look of someone who'd lived hard years under the western sun, yet couldn't be much older than 23. His eyes held wisdom beyond his years and something else, integrity, perhaps, that made her want to trust him despite having just met him. Why would you risk your position here to help me? She asked finally. Cole's expression grew serious. I knew your father, Miss Bailey. Not well, but enough to respect him. Met him 2 years back when he bought some horses from the outfit I was working for in Colorado. He spoke of his daughter with pride, said you had a head for business that would make the Broken Arrow thrive when his time was done. He shook his head slightly. Doesn't sound like a man who'd cut his daughter out of her inheritance. Willa felt a lump in her throat at his words. That sounded exactly like her father. I'm headed to see Jenkins now, she said with new determination. If you truly want to help, I won't refuse the company. Cole nodded once and disappeared into the stable, returning minutes later mounted on a sturdy buckskin gelding. Without further discussion, they set off toward Sweetwater, the rising sun at their backs. By the time they reached town, Sweetwater was beginning to stir with morning activity. They tied their horses outside the small building that housed Jenkins' law practice and several other businesses. Willa smoothed her riding skirt and took a deep breath before entering. Walter Jenkins was a thin, nervous man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. His eyebrows shot up in surprise when Willa entered his office. Miss Bailey, I didn't expect to see you. My condolences on your father's passing. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, Willa said, getting straight to the point. I've come about my father's will. I'd like to see the original document, please. Jenkins' hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. I'm afraid I can't show you that without your brother's permission. As the sole beneficiary, that's precisely what I'm here to discuss, Willa interrupted. I don't believe my father would have left everything to Wade. It doesn't make sense. Nevertheless, Jenkins stammered, the will is quite clear. All assets to your brother, signed and witnessed properly. Who witnessed it? Cole asked from where he stood by the door. Jenkins blinked, seeming to notice Cole for the first time. Well, myself and my clerk, of course. And you saw Thomas Bailey sign it, Cole pressed. Well, naturally, Jenkins replied, though his eyes darted nervously to the side. Willa leaned forward. Mr. Jenkins, I believe my father had a different will, one that divided the ranch between Wade and myself. Do you recall preparing such a document? The lawyer's face paled visibly. Miss Bailey, I cannot discuss, Mr. Jenkins, Willa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. If my brother has somehow convinced you to participate in something illegal, you should know that I won't stop until I uncover the truth. And when I do, anyone involved will face consequences. Jenkins swallowed hard, glancing between Willa and Cole. Your brother can be quite persuasive, Miss Bailey, and he has some concerning associations these days. What does that mean? Willa demanded. Jenkins hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. He opened a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope. Your father came to me 6 months ago with instructions. If anything happened to him, I was to give this to you directly. His hands shook as he passed it to her. Your brother doesn't know about this. Willa broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, her father's familiar handwriting bringing fresh tears to her eyes. My dearest Willa, she read aloud, her voice trembling. If you're reading this, I've passed on sooner than expected. The ranch is yours and Wade's in equal measure, as I've always planned. But I fear your brother's recent behavior suggests he may try to claim it all. The official will is in the safe at the ranch. Combination is your birthday. Be careful, my girl. Wade has fallen in with dangerous men. Trust few, but stand your ground. You're stronger than you know. All my love, Pa. Willa looked up from the letter, stunned. Mr. Jenkins, did you prepare a will dividing the ranch between us? Jenkins nodded miserably. I did about a year ago. It's the only valid will I'm aware of. Whatever document your brother has, I didn't prepare it. Thank you, Willa said, folding the letter carefully and tucking it into her pocket. You've been very helpful. Outside on the boardwalk, Cole studied her face. You all right? No, Willa admitted, but I will be. We need to get back to the ranch and find that will before Wade realizes what we're doing. Cole nodded grimly. We should split up. I'll head back now. He expects me to be working. You stop by the general store or something, make it look like you came to town for normal errands. No sense tipping our hand. Good idea, Willa agreed, though the thought of facing Wade alone with what she now knew made her stomach clench with fear. Miss Bailey, Cole said, his voice softening slightly as he prepared to mount his horse. Be careful. Your brother's been drinking heavily and his temper's short. If he suspects anything, you find me right away, you understand, Willa nodded, touched by his concern. I will, and Mr. Northrop, thank you. His blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Call me Cole. Then he swung into the saddle and rode out, leaving Willa with the weight of her father's letter and a dangerous road ahead. By the time Willa returned to the ranch 3 hours later, arms laden with packages from the general store to support her cover story, the day had grown hot and dusty. She found Wade on the porch with 2 men she didn't recognize, rough-looking characters with cold eyes and holstered pistols. There she is, Wade said as she dismounted. My baby sister, acting like she owns the place. Willa forced a smile. Just picking up some essentials in town. Hello, gentlemen. The men barely acknowledged her with nods. One of them, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. You still planning to head out tomorrow? Wade asked her, his tone making it clear it wasn't really a question. Actually, Willa said lightly, I thought I might stay a bit longer to help sort through Pa's things. Wade's expression darkened. No need, I've got it handled. Still, she insisted, climbing the porch steps with her packages. It would feel wrong not to help. As she passed them to enter the house, the scarred man muttered something that made the others laugh, something crude that made Willa's cheeks burn. Wade didn't correct him. Inside, Willa deposited her packages in the kitchen and tried to calm her racing heart. She needed to find the safe, but Wade and his friends were too close. She'd have to wait. Her opportunity came after dinner when Wade and his companions rode out, saying they had business in town. The moment their horses disappeared from view, Willa hurried to her father's bedroom. The safe was hidden behind a painting of her mother, a detail her father had shared years ago. The small iron safe opened with a click when she entered her birth date, 0417. Inside, among deeds and other papers, she found her father's true will, dividing the broken arrow equally between her and Wade, with the stipulation that neither could sell their half without the other's agreement for at least 5 years. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by anger. Wade had been planning to steal her inheritance, to erase her from the broken arrow completely. And judging by the men he'd surrounded himself with, he wouldn't hesitate to use force if necessary. The sound of a horse approaching sent Willa's heart racing again. She quickly replaced everything except the will, which she tucked inside her dress and closed the safe. Through the window, she saw Cole dismounting by the barn, alone. She hurried outside to meet him. "I found it," she said without preamble, pulling him into the shadows of the barn. "The real will. It's just as Pa's letter said the ranch is meant to be split between us." Cole's expression was grave. "That's good news, but it complicates things. Wade's been selling off stock all day, cattle that should be half yours and the men he's brought in." He shook his head. "They're not ranch hands, Miss Bailey. They're hired guns." Fear pooled in Willa's stomach. "What do I do? If I confront him, you don't," Cole said firmly. "Not alone, anyway. We need to get that will to a judge, get it verified and recorded officially before Wade returns." "The nearest judge is in Laramie," Willa pointed out. "That's 2 days' ride." "Then we'd better get moving," Cole replied. "Pack only what you need. I'll saddle the horses." 30 minutes later, they were riding hard toward the east, the setting sun at their backs. Willa had changed into her most practical riding clothes and packed only essentials. The will was secured inside a leather pouch tied to her body beneath her clothes. They rode until full dark made it dangerous to continue, then made camp in a sheltered ravine well away from the trail. As Cole built a small, carefully concealed fire, Willa couldn't help but study him in the flickering light. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked finally. "You barely know me." Cole was silent for a moment, feeding small twigs to the growing flames. "Your father gave me a chance once when others wouldn't," he said finally. "I was just a kid who'd gotten on the wrong side of some powerful men. Thomas Bailey hired me anyway, said he was a good judge of character." He looked up at her. "Worked for him for nearly a year before moving on to other outfits. Never forgot his kindness." "You didn't mention that before," Willa said softly. Cole shrugged. "Wasn't relevant. When I heard he'd passed and saw the notice that the Broken Arrow was hiring, it seemed right to come back. Pay my respects by helping his son keep the place running." His jaw tightened. "Didn't take long to see that Wade Bailey is nothing like his father." "No," Willa agreed sadly. "He wasn't always like this. We were close once before our mother died. After that, something changed in him." They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, then took turns keeping watch through the night. Willa dozed fitfully, jolting awake at every sound from the darkness. By dawn, they were riding again, pushing hard toward Laramie. They had just crossed into more open country when Cole suddenly reined in his horse, signaling for Willa to do the same. He pointed silently to a dust cloud in the distance behind them. "Riders," he said grimly. "At least 3 moving fast." Willa's blood ran cold. "Wade, most likely." "We need to split up. You take the will and head straight for Laramie. I'll lead them off in another direction." "No," Willa protested. "That's too dangerous." "More dangerous for both of us to be caught," Cole insisted. "That will is the only thing keeping you from being left with nothing. It has to reach the judge." Before she could argue further, Cole leaned over and did something Willa never expected. He kissed her, swift and firm. "For luck," he murmured, then wheeled his horse around. "Now ride." Stunned, Willa could only obey, spurring Penny eastward while Cole headed south, making sure he was visible to their pursuers. The last she saw of him, he was galloping across the open plain, drawing the dust cloud after him. Willa rode harder than she ever had, pushing Penny to her limits. By mid-afternoon, she caught sight of Laramie in the distance, its buildings shimmering in the heat. Relief surged through her, but it was short-lived. The sound of hoofbeats behind her sent fresh fear coursing through her veins. She glanced back to see a lone rider gaining on her. Wade. Somehow he'd figured out their ruse and followed her instead of Cole. His face was contorted with rage even from a distance. Willa leaned low over Penny's neck. "Come on, girl," she urged. "Just a little farther." The race to Laramie became a blur of dust and thunder. Willa reached the outskirts of town barely ahead of her brother, galloping down the main street and reining in sharply in front of the courthouse. She dismounted in a rush, stumbling on legs numb from riding. Wade's horse slid to a stop moments later. "Give me that will, Willa," he demanded, his voice deadly quiet as he dismounted. "You've got no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Willa replied, backing toward the courthouse steps. "I'm claiming what's rightfully mine, half of what Pa built. You think you can run a ranch?" Wade sneered, advancing on her. "You're nothing but a schoolgirl playing at being a rancher." "Better that than a thief stealing from his own sister," Willa shot back, Wade's face darkened with fury. He lunged for her, but before he could reach her, the distinctive click of a revolver hammer being pulled back froze him in place. "That'll be far enough, Mr. Bailey," came Cole's steady voice from behind him. Wade slowly turned. Cole sat astride his buckskin, dusty and weary but very much alive, his revolver trained on Wade's chest. "This doesn't concern you, Northrop," Wade growled. "I beg to differ," Cole replied. "Miss Bailey, I suggest you go inside and find the judge while I have a conversation with your brother." Willa didn't need to be told twice. She hurried up the courthouse steps, the precious will clutched in her hand. What happened next was a blur of legal proceedings. Judge Harmon, a stern man with a reputation for fairness, reviewed the will, compared signatures, and listened to Willa's account of events. When Wade was brought in, flanked by the town marshal and Cole, his protests fell on deaf ears. "This appears to be your father's legitimate will, Mr. Bailey," the judge declared. "The document you presented to your sister was a forgery, and a poor one at that. Thomas Bailey's intention was clear. The broken arrow belongs equally to both his children." Wade's face was a mask of cold fury. "This isn't over," he spat. "Actually, it is," the marshal interjected. "Judge, we've had a wire from Sweetwater. Seems Mr. Bailey here is wanted for questioning in connection with some missing cattle across 3 counties, and possibly worse." Willa watched in shock as her brother was led away, his threats echoing behind him. She felt numb, hollow, victorious, yes, but devastated that it had come to this. Outside the courthouse, Cole waited for her, hat in hand. "It's over," he said gently. "The judge said he'll have the will properly recorded by morning." "Thank you," Willa said, suddenly overcome with exhaustion. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Cole looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No need for that, just doing what's right." They took rooms at the hotel in Laramie that night, both too exhausted to begin the journey back to the Broken Arrow. Over a quiet dinner, Willa struggled to process everything that had happened. "What will happen to Wade?" she asked finally. "Hard to say," Cole replied. "Depends on what they can prove. Cattle rustling's a hanging offense in these parts, but him being your father's son might earn him some leniency." Willa nodded, her heart heavy despite her victory. "And what about you? Will you stay on at the Broken Arrow now that everything's changed?" Cole studied her across the table, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether the new co-owner wants to keep me on," he said simply. Willa felt a flush rise to her cheeks as she remembered his impulsive kiss during their escape. "I think the ranch would benefit greatly from your expertise, Mr. Northrop." A small smile touched his lips. "Just expertise." "Perhaps not just that," Willa admitted, surprising herself with her boldness. "You've shown yourself to be a man of integrity as well. The Broken Arrow needs that too." The journey back to the ranch was considerably more leisurely than their flight from it. They rode side by side, talking about the future of the Broken Arrow, about Willa's ideas for expanding into breeding horses as well as cattle, about Cole's experiences working ranches across the West. By the time they reached the Broken Arrow 3 days later, something had shifted between them. What had begun as an alliance of necessity had transformed into something neither had expected: a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection. The ranch hands, who had remained loyal despite Wade's erratic behavior, welcomed Willa home with obvious relief. The men Wade had brought in had disappeared as soon as word reached them of his arrest. Slowly, Life at the Broken Arrow began to find a new rhythm, with Willa and Cole working together to restore what Wade had nearly destroyed. As spring turned to summer, Willa discovered that running a ranch came more naturally to her than she'd expected. The business knowledge from her schooling combined with the practical skills she'd learned growing up gave her a unique perspective. And having Cole beside her, teaching her what she didn't know and respecting what she did, made all the difference. One evening in late July, they sat together on the porch after a long day of work. The setting sun painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the nearby meadow. "I received a letter from the marshal today," Willa said quietly. "Wade's been sentenced to 5 years, could have been worse." Cole nodded. "You still planning to visit him?" "He's my brother," Willa said simply. Despite everything, they sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky slowly darken. "I've been thinking," Cole said finally. "A dangerous pastime," Willa teased, earning a smile from him. "Your father's will says neither you nor Wade can sell your half of the ranch for 5 years without the other's consent," he continued. "That means when Wade gets out, you'll have to deal with him again." Willa nodded soberly. "I know, I've been worried about that too. There might be a way to protect the ranch," Cole said, suddenly looking nervous in a way Willa had never seen before. "A legal way, I mean. I'm listening." Cole took a deep breath. "If you were to marry, your husband would have legal standing to help protect your interests against Wade." Willa's heart began to beat faster. "Are you proposing a marriage of convenience, Mr. Northrop?" Cole met her eyes. "There wouldn't be anything convenient about it for me, Willa. I've fallen in love with you. Probably started the moment you rode up that first day, looking like you could take on the world." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "Cole, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to marry me just to protect the ranch. I'm asking because I want to build a life with you. The ranch protection would just be a fortunate side effect." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes. "And here I thought I was being terribly modern and forward, falling in love with my foreman." Cole's face broke into a radiant smile. "Is that a yes?" Willa laughed through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the Sweetwater Church, with the entire ranch staff in attendance. Judge Harmon himself came from Laramie to perform the ceremony, adding an extra layer of legal protection to their union. As they exchanged vows, Willa couldn't help but think how her father would have approved of Cole, a man of honor who had stood by her when she needed it most, who loved the land as much as she did, and who looked at her as if she were the sunrise after the longest night. The Broken Arrow thrived under their joint stewardship. By the time Wade was released from prison 3 years later, Willa and Cole had transformed it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. They had also welcomed their first child, a son they named Thomas, after Willa's father. Wade returned a changed man, humbled by his time behind bars and willing to accept the partnership his father had intended. With Cole's steady influence and Willa's forgiving heart, the three of them found a way forward that honored Thomas Bailey's legacy while building something new. On the 5th anniversary of their marriage, Cole surprised Willa with a special gift, a small silver locket containing a tiny portrait of her father on one side and a lock of their son's hair on the other. "To remember where we came from," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "and where we're going." Willa touched the locket reverently, then reached up to kiss her husband. "I never thought I'd be grateful that my brother tried to steal my inheritance," she whispered against his lips. Cole smiled, drawing her closer in the golden light of sunset. "Funny how life works out. His greed brought me to you, and for that I'll always be thankful." As they stood together on the porch of their home, the Broken Arrow stretching out before them, whole and thriving, Willa knew that her father had been right all along. She was stronger than she knew. And with Cole beside her, there was nothing they couldn't face together. The inheritance she'd fought so hard to protect had given her far more than land and cattle. It had led her to the truest love she could have imagined, a love as vast as the Wyoming sky and as enduring as the land they called home.